Here's a quick guide on how to create an automatically opening door for your Unreal projects. First things first, you're going to need a door and a door frame, and if you don't have a door frame then you at least just need a door. You'll also need to try and make sure that the door's pivot is in the corner, so that when you rotate it, it opens believably. If you don't have that, there is a workaround I can show you at the end of the video, where we'll add a scene component to the door and pivot that instead. First things first, let's create a blueprint which we can use for this door. In my Blueprints folder, I'm going to right-click and create a new blueprint class. This is an object which is going to be placed or spawned in the world, so I'm going to choose the Actor Blueprint base class. And I'm just going to call this BP Auto Door. This automatic door is going to be a relatively simple blueprint. It's just going to contain a single static mesh component. So I've added a new static mesh here, and I'm just going to name that the door mesh. This static mesh is going to use the door that's included in the starter content, but you can use whatever static mesh you would like. Once you've added the door component, the next thing we need is a collider to detect when the player is close enough for the door to open. So I'm going to add a box collision component to this blueprint. And I'm just going to adjust the location of this box to be in the middle of the door, and then increase the size of this so that it'll be detecting when the player collides with this box. That's when we'll trigger the door opening animation. So you can make this whatever size you want. I'm going to also make sure that this box component is not attached to the door like it is currently. You can see that it's staggered in the hierarchy, so I'm just going to drag it onto the default scene route and attach it to that. Now when I open the door, the box doesn't move, whereas previously if I open the door the box would have moved with it. Could have just made it more difficult to use. Anyway, we have a collider and we have a static mesh, so we can now detect when objects approach the door. I'm going to head over to the event graph on this blueprint, and all we need to do is detect when the player approaches the door. So I'm going to start by selecting the box collider component here in my components list, and I'm going to choose one of the events on the right hand side here. I'm going to choose on component begin overlap. So when something touches that collider, this event will fire. I'm going to check to see whether the object which has touched this collider is the player character. And one of the quickest ways of doing that is to simply get the player pawn, drag off from the blue pin, type equal, and then get the other actor, that's the actor that has touched the box collider, and compare these two. We then use a branch and hook up our condition. So if the actor which has touched the box collider is the player pawn, then this will be true. If that's the case, we want to open the door. We're going to do this very simply using a node called MoveComponentTo. This is a node which can be used to do simple movements and rotations all in one place. So I'm going to connect the true node up to the move, which is the start point of this node. It requires an input component to tell it which component to move, and that's going to be our door mesh. So left click and drag that into the blueprint and hook that up here then. And all of the transforms are relative here. So I simply want to rotate this door, let's go with something like 100 degrees on the Z axis. You can add ease if you want the animation to have a little bit of a slower start and finish, or you can leave these blank if you want it to be a straight, simple, linear transformation. And you can change the duration of the animation here in over time. I'm going to set this to 1 second for starters. And that's it. When the player touches the box, we will move this component 100 degrees rotation in the Z axis. Let's place this blueprint in our level, and let's test it. There's my door. I'm just going to right click and play from here, and when I approach the door it opened. One more time. There we go. Now if you want it to close automatically, or if you want it to open the other way, you'll have to tweak this. So to reset this door to its original location, we can use a variation of the same code here. Select the box component and add an on component end overlap event. We can use the exact same script here for detecting whether this event has been triggered by the player or not. Copy these nodes and paste them down here. The other actor is the player, which is the actor that has triggered this event, and we're just going to check to see if it is equal to the player. And if it is, I'm going to copy and paste this as well. If that's true, we're going to move the door mesh back to a relative rotation of 0. I enter the collider, the door opens, and when I leave the collider, the door now closes. So you can open and move through, and the door will close behind you. Now, what happens if you have a door with a center pivot like this? If you try and rotate it the way we've been doing it before, this simply won't work. The door will rotate on the spot and it won't open convincingly. So I'm going to create a whole new blueprint which is very similar to the one that we've used before. Right click, new blueprint. It's going to be an actor. We're going to place it in the level BP underscore door with pivot. Door with pivot is going to need a static mesh component, just like we did previously. I'm also going to call this the door mesh. And then when I grab my new door, the one with the broken pivot, and try and rotate it, again you can see that problem. It rotates from the center rather than having a pivot point on the actor, on the mesh that's actually in the corner. So I'm going to fix this by adding a new component to this actor. This is a scene component. The scene component is very useful because it's basically just an empty component. All it contains really is a position in space and nothing else. And then I'm going to take the door, drag it and drop it onto the scene component. Rename this the new pivot. If I select the new pivot, this scene component that we created, and rotate it, the door will rotate with it because it is parented to it like this. If I take the door and move it so that the scene component is directly on the corner of the mesh, now when I rotate that same scene component, we get convincing door animations as if the door's pivot was in the correct place. There are ways of resetting the pivot inside of Unreal, but this is a very convenient way of adding your own pivot anywhere you want. And now we can construct the exact same code as we did with the other door. And let's test that. The new door with the pivot in the correct place. I didn't plug in a component. Nope, not the door mesh. This is an important change. When you're adding the rotation to this new door with the new pivot point, you're going to want to rotate the pivot itself, not the door mesh. So this is what you plug into the MoveComponentTo node. Well, that was a bit fast. I forgot to change the time. Perfect. You can also use this instead of a rotation to add movement to a door. So if instead of opening like a conventional hinge door, if I want this to be a sci-fi door and I want it to slide sideways, add a target relative location instead of a relative rotation, and your door will move, simply slide to one side when you've placed it rather than rotating.